Hi, good evening. It's good to be back in Malaysia. Just want to give a shout out to the members of the church in EFC Cavite. Thank you for being a brilliant host. Thank you, Jarek, Marie, and Philip for your fantastic hospitality. Thank you, Arnell and Jack, for preaching such a wonderful gospel. I saw you that day. Right. Let's wait for some people to come in. We have now about... Hi, Miko. Didn't get a chance to meet you in the Philippines. But today I want to speak to you about the Lake of Fire. Pastor Boniface is here from Senegal. I acknowledge you. Thank you for your ministry. And one of the interesting things here is this. Now, I just went off a discussion with someone in Carl Butler's Facebook. And it seems that he put up a very good video. Hi, Dave. Thank you for taking care of me in Philippines. I really owe a great deal to you for taking me here and there. Let's get back to the subject. And I was rather intrigued by something that he posted. Philip, we were just talking about you. Thank you for being such a great host to me. And Carl actually posted a video by Don Keithley, and the title of the video is actually Hell's Illusion, which basically says that hell doesn't exist. Now, I also want to point out to you that after visiting Philippines, I realized that some Filipino pastors were banned from speaking because they don't believe in hell. Now, so people who don't believe in hell are always branded as heretics. Can I share with you something? Pastor Derek Day is here. Hi, Derek. I was watching a video just now, but there was a bit too much of interruption, so I decided to watch it later when everything is placed nicely. Thank you. So what happens is that people who don't believe in hell are always branded as heretics. Can I tell you something? People in hell should be branded as heretics. The reason is very simple. They don't study the Bible. They think they know the Bible very much. Most of the things is that I have another guy who, I know the replace is smooth, thanks. I have another pastor who says this. Now, if you have sex, and when you're having sex, and you say things like, oh my God, or oh Jesus, you are going to hell. No, that posting is actually on my wall. You can actually have a look at it. That's how ridiculous things have become. And I want to talk to you today about the lake of fire. The lake of fire. Because this is the one thing that every believer is afraid of. And every believer has no idea what the hell this is. Let me read to you Revelation chapter 20, verse 13 to 15. The sea gave up its dead, and that were in it, and death and Hades. Now, I want you to realize that it says death and Hades. Now, Hades here is actually a variant of the word hell. It's actually the Greek version of the Hebrews when it comes to Sheol. It says death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done. The question is this, guys, are you judged based on what you had done? You are not judged because of what you had done. You are judged because of what Jesus had done. So there's already something very wrong when you apply this passage to your future rather than to your past. To your future rather than to your past. Hi, Rennie. Good to see you. I hope Clang is good. Now, then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. You realize very interestingly, the lake of fire here is not hell. But hell and death is thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. Now listen to this. And anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. Anybody whose name was not found in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. And guys, can I tell you something? Your names are not written in the book of life. If your names are written in the book of life, then you are judged according to what you have done. But your names are not written in the book of life because you are not judged according to what you have done. You are judged on the basis of what Jesus has done. So your name is not written in the book of life. Let me tell you why. Let's read Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. At the time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. And be a time of distress such as never had from the beginning of the nations until then. Notice the word, until then. But at that time, your people means the Jews, everyone whose name is written in the book of life will be delivered. Multitudes will sleep in the dust of death, will awake, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars ever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end, until the time of the end, until the time of the end, until the time of the end. Now listen to what Daniel says. Hi, Gigi. We have one of the most beautiful women joining us today, Gigi Lee. Now, the great prince who protects your people will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has never happened from the beginning of the nations until then. That's what Daniel says, until then. Now listen to what Jesus says. Matthew 24, verse 21. It says this, from then there will be great distress, unequal from the beginning of the world until now. Until now. Until now. Daniel says, until then. So, purportedly, when did the resurrection and the book of life is open? When? Hi, Alicia. When? Notice what it says. Until then. Jesus says, until now. When? AD 30. So when did the resurrection take place? When was the book of life opened? When was the second resurrection take place? When did the sea of death give up its dead? At the generation of Jesus Christ. Now many people look at this verse, never to be equal again, as if it cannot mean that it will happen then. So it will happen again, like for example what happened in Hitler to the Jews. But listen to what I'm about to tell you. Joel chapter 2 says this, blow the trumpet in Zion, sound the alarm on my holy hill. Guys, I want you to realize in the Old Testament there's no such thing as a trumpet. What it actually means here is a horn. It's a shofar horn. Alright? Now, let all those who live in the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is close at hand, a day of darkness, a day of gloom, a day of clouds, coming in the clouds, and blackness like a dawn spreading across the mountains. A large and mighty army comes. Listen to this phrase. Such as never was in ancient times. That's exactly what Jesus says. Such as never it was in ancient times. Nor will there be in ages to come. And this is exactly what Jesus said. From then there will be great distress, unequal from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equal again. The never to be equal again there does not mean the event will not happen again. It means there won't be an army which is as great as Rome. Never will there be in ages again. So I want you to also note something very interesting, and I want you to read Revelation chapter 11, verse 8. Now this is the problem I had with this crazy bishop in India who insists that Sodom is a place where the Antichrist reigns. Hi, Pastor Paul, Congressman Bishop Paul Hernandez. Thank you for being such a wonderful host and a wonderful brother. You are really, really becoming one of my closest friends and a dear, dear brother at heart. Pastor Paul is really a fantastic theologian, very learned, as well as very kind and a person who's really, really humble. Hi, Adrian. Nice to see you. Now, we are talking about Revelations 11, verse 8. And this is what it says. Their bodies will lie in the public square of the great city, which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where the Lord was crucified. Now, when you read Revelations, you begin to realize that there are hints by the Apostle John as to what he's really talking about. And when you read this verse, you realize that he's actually talking about the place where the Lord was crucified. And that's Jerusalem. That's Jerusalem. Somebody said this, Jerusalem is the holy city, therefore it cannot mean Jerusalem. Guys, people who talk like that do not know the scriptures. They think they know the scriptures. Because, you see, Jerusalem was also called Mount Sinai. Is that good or bad? It's bad. Because Mount Sinai is the central city of the law. Jerusalem was also called Babylon by Peter. Is that good or bad? It's bad. Because Babylon is evil. Is Sodom good? No, it's not. It's terrible. Is Egypt good? No, it's not. It's terrible. Because here we are talking about a city that gave up his Lord and united itself with Rome. Now, why is Sodom mentioned in Book of Revelation, and how is it tied to the lake of fire? Let me try to explain this to you. When you read Genesis 14:2, you read this verse that this made war with Bera, king of Sodom. What's the name of the king of Sodom? Bera. Bersha, king of Gomorrah. Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemember, king of Zeboim, and king of Bela, which is Zoar. Now, notice what is written in Genesis 14, verse 3. All this were joined together in the valley of Siddim, which is called the Salt Sea. Very important, remember the word salt, remember the word sea. Now, this is what is stated in the Amplified Bible. It says that they were joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is the sea of salt. So what is in the sea of salt? Salt. Very simple. Now, when you look at another translation, it actually says this. All this later were joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Dead Sea Valley. The Salt Sea is also known as the Dead Sea. Now, let me show you something here. If you look at this map, you will see that Sodom and Gomorrah is right at the Dead Sea. Right at the Dead Sea. Now, I also want you to realize something else. The Dead Sea in Hebrew is called Yam Ha-Melah. It also means the Sea of Salt. But more importantly is that you notice that the Greeks actually call it something else. The Greeks call it Lake Asaph. Lake Asaph. What in the world is Asaph? Asaph is this: sulfur plus petroleum. Sulfur plus petroleum. Asaph is sulfur and petroleum. So when we are talking about the Salt Sea, we are talking about the Dead Sea, it is also known as Lake Asaph. You can actually Google this. You can actually try to read this in Greek as well. So Lake Asaph is actually the Dead Sea as well as the lake, as well as the Sea of Salt, So what happens is this, guys. I want you to realize before it became the Sea of Salt, or before it's called the Salt Sea, the lake there is filled with sulfur and petroleum. Sulfur and petroleum. Now, what happens when fire comes down from heaven onto the lake? There'll be a massive explosion. Now, let me show you what Asaph is. Okay, let me show you what Asaph is. This is what Asaph is. It is bitumen. It is sulfur plus petroleum. So, the sea, or rather the place where Sodom and Gomorrah was filled with this. And so what happens is that when fire rains upon this, what will happen? Hi Cyrus, good to see you. I'm back to KL. Thank you for this fantastic haircut. You are a fantastic hairstylist. And so, this is what was in the Dead Sea. Now, imagine for a moment, fire comes upon the lake. What will happen? There will be a massive explosion. And when it comes to a massive explosion, what will happen to Sodom and Gomorrah? It will be destroyed immediately. That's how Sodom and Gomorrah was literally destroyed, because of an explosion in the Dead Sea, an explosion in Lake Esef, an explosion in the Sea of Salt. And let's say, for example, if you happen to be Lot's wife, and you're running away from the Sea of Salt, and you turn back, what will you be covered with? Because when sulfur and petroleum mixes with fire, what results is this: salt. And that's why in the Dead Sea it's filled with salt, because the petroleum and the sulfur was totally consumed by fire. Listen to this, very interestingly. I've heard this before, Paul. Yeah, thanks, Paula. Thanks for confirming this. But listen to this. I'm gonna bring you guys deeper into it. Look at what 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 24 says. She who is in Babylon, chosen together with you, send you her greetings. So does my son Mark. Where is Babylon? Babylon never existed during Peter's time. You want to know what is it? Listen to this. Galatians 4:25. Now Hagar stands for Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. That's bad, because Mount Sinai is about the law in Arabia, and it corresponds to the present city of Jerusalem, because she is in slavery with the children. So when Paul talks about Babylon, when Paul talks about Mount Sinai, he's referring to Jerusalem. So when Peter talks about Babylon, who is he referring to? Again, Jerusalem. Can you see the link? It's also Sodom, it's also Egypt. So Babylon, Sinai, Sodom, Egypt is referring to, yes, Jerusalem. Now somebody say Jerusalem is a holy city. No, it's not. Because Jerusalem was the city in which the Lord was crucified. Jerusalem was also the people who crucified Jesus. The people who crucified Jesus. Remember something very important. When Jesus was brought before Pontius Pilate, the day before, Judas was paid 30 pieces of silver. If you actually read Zechariah, there's a prophecy that says that the people don't want God anymore. And so God said, can you please buy me out of the contract then? And so what happened was that the Jews actually went into the Bible and tried to find out what's the cheapest price you can actually pay for God. And they found this: the cheapest price to pay for a wounded slave, which is 30 pieces of silver. And so what happened was this. It was the chief priests who paid Judas off. Meaning to say, it was Israel who paid Judas off, 30 pieces of silver. And the minute they did that, they arrested Jesus and they brought Jesus before a trial. Now right after the trial, they brought him to Pontius Pilate to be executed. When Pontius Pilate asked them what they have done wrong, they just said, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. Then he said, what shall we do with the king of the Jews? Then they said, crucify him. The interesting thing that Caiaphas said was this: we have no king except Caesar. Now you have to understand what that implicates, because you have to understand that God was not only their king, but God was also their husband. God was also their husband. And as such, when you say we have no king except Caesar, what they actually mean is this: I'm going to divorce you, God. And Jesus is standing right in front of them. I'm going to divorce you, Jesus, and I'm going to marry Caesar. I'm not going to sleep with you anymore, God. I'm going to be sleeping with Rome. Thus, I want you to realize that the whore of Babylon is Jerusalem. Because Jerusalem acted in adultery politically with Rome. And more interestingly is that during the time, Herod's daughter, which was supposed to be the princess of Jerusalem, was actually sleeping with Titus and became his mistress. Very interesting. Listen to this. Listen to this. For if your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than with 2 hands and go to hell, where the fires never go out. If your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life crippled with 2 feet and be thrown into hell. If your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. It's better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes being thrown to hell. Notice the word, hell, 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 hell. And he says this, where the worms that eat them do not die, and the fires that burn them do not quench. Now listen to the very next verse. Everyone will be salted with fire. Notice again, salt, fire, salt, fire. Where is that? Again, the lake of fire, the salt sea, Jerusalem. Jesus wasn't talking about hell. Jesus was talking about Jerusalem. Now let me prove to you. The worms that eat them do not die, and the fires that burn them do not quench. If you read your Bible, there is a small little D there in the NIV. When you click on it, it goes to this verse. Isaiah 66, verse 24. And this is what it says. And they will go out and look at the dead bodies of those who rebel against me. The worms that eat them do not die, and the fires that burn them do not quench. And there will be a loathsome to all mankind. Notice the very important word here. Look onto the dead bodies. Look onto the dead bodies. Look onto the dead bodies. Everybody tells you hell is a place where your soul and your spirit is burnt. It's not. Isaiah 66 clearly tells you what the worms that eat them will not die and the fires that burn them do not quench is referring to a graveyard filled with dead bodies. And there will be a loathsome to mankind. So another translation says it will be an abomination to mankind. So in other words, people could actually see how the worms that eat them do not die and how the fires that burn them do not quench. Because this is talking about Jerusalem and how Jerusalem had almost 800,000 people massacred by Titus. And it took them forever to actually burn the corpse. That's why the worms that eat them do not die and the fires that burn them will not be quenched. Now recently, Paul Hernandez and I, together with Jarek Surianto, we had meals together, and sometimes, when we order something, it takes about 45 minutes to come. And so we will say to ourselves, it's taking forever for the food to come. Now, how long is that forever? It's only 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Does it mean over and over and over again? Hello, Ronald. So good to see you in Philippines. So glad you're here. Now, when he says the worms that eat them will not die and the fires that burn them will not quench, it doesn't mean forever and ever. It just means that it takes a long time for the bodies to be consumed. And I can tell you honestly, Jerusalem was on fire for more than 6 months. Because number one, it was burning the crops. Number two, Jerusalem itself is being burnt. So where's the lake of fire? In Jerusalem. Pre-AD 70 Jerusalem. Now I want to share with you 4 words that were used as the word hell. And the unfortunate thing about the King James Version, which is a terribly translated Bible, and some people hold it as the holy translation. No, it's not. It's one of the worst translations in the world. It has, I think, about 113 hits on the word hell. And do you know what? None of it refers to the hell that Jesus spoke about. Because the understanding of hell that we have today is done by 3 persons. One is called St. Augustine, the other person is called John Milton, and the last person is called Jonathan Dante. Augustine wrote a book called Confessions of St. Augustine, which he described about purgatory and all this nonsense. John Milton wrote a book called 7 Deadly Sins. And lastly, Dante wrote a book called Dante's Inferno. None of these are scriptures. There are only 4 words that are used in scriptures when it comes to the word hell. Number 1 is called Sheol. Number 2 is called Hades. Number 3 is called Tartarus. And number 4 is Gehenna. Let's deal with Sheol. Sheol in the Hebrew Bible is a place of darkness which all the dead go, whether righteous or unrighteous. Regardless of moral choices made in life, a place of stillness and darkness cut off from life, but not from God. Hi, Susie. So good to see you. Always love your smile. And he says this. Do you realize in Psalm 139 verse 8, it says, if I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. So David says, it's a place where God is there. But why do you think God is there for those people who have been cut off from life? In fact, the legend has it that Sheol is a place where people who died without graves go. It's not the hellfire that we think it is, because there's no fire there. Next thing you have is Hades, which is actually called the unseen. Now, Hades in Greek mythology is one of the sons of Titans, Kronos and Rhea, and the brother of Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, Hera, and Hestia. Hera Wong, if you are here, this is where you got your name. You are a Titan. In Greek translation of the Hebrew, the word Hades is actually used for Sheol, denoting a place of the dead. Now, I want to come to you with this word, Tartarus, which is the third word. It's a deep abyss that is used as a dungeon of torment, suffering for the wicked, as a prison for the Titans. Notice the Titans. Zeus is a Titan, Poseidon is a Titan, Medusa is a Titan, and all this. Now, this is Greek mythology. Greek mythology. This, however, is also used in the New Testament by 2 Peter 2:4, when he says that, for God did not spare angels when they sinned and cast them into hell, committed them in chains in gloomy darkness and to be kept until judgment, and you click it, it says Tartarus. You have to understand, guys, although it refers or seemingly refers to, hello Leonardo, to hell, where the angels were kept, it is Greek mythology. Now, some of you then said, oh, you see, Jesus himself says that hell is a place prepared for the angels and his messengers. And do you know what the word that Jesus used is not Tartarus or Tartarus or Tataru? It's actually Gehenna. So Jesus is completely saying something totally different from what Peter is saying. Because Peter is quoting from a very legendary book called the Book of Enoch, which is filled with fairy tales. But it's a book that is very popular among the Jews at the time, because the Jews at the time has this love for mythology. And number one, the Book of Enoch is not written by Enoch himself. Number two, the book of Enoch is rejected in the scriptures. It's in the Catholic Bible, but it's not in the Evangelical Bible, because it's a book full of fairy tales. In fact, Tartarus is a place, according to Plato, where souls are judged after the death and the wicked receive divine punishment. Like other previous entities such as earth, night, and time, Tartarus is considered to be a primordial force or a god. And it's only mentioned once in scriptures. It's also known as Tataru. It's a shortened form of the classical Greek word kata tataru, which actually appears in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. That leaves us with one last word. And this is the word that Jesus always used as hell. It's the word Gehenna. Gehenna is a small valley in Jerusalem. In the Hebrew Bible, Gehenna was initially known where some of the kings of Judah actually sacrificed their children by fire. Thereafter, it was deemed as cursed. Now, in the King James Version, this term Gehenna appears 13 times in 11 verses as the Valley of Hinnom, Valley of the son of Hinnom, and Valley of the children of Hinnom. Guys, in other words, it was a dumping ground for the Jews. It was a dumping ground for the Jews. it was where the bodies of people who died without graves were sent to. In fact, if Joseph Arimathea didn't offer his tomb to Jesus, Jesus would have been burnt in Gehenna. His body would have been thrown there. Do you want to know how Gehenna looks like today? This is how Gehenna looks like today. It's a beautiful, 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 beautiful park. You can actually go there. So, what am I trying to tell you? I'm trying to tell you this. The lake of fire is in your past. It's about Jerusalem and how it defied Rome. And therefore Rome destroyed it. Today we have a lot of people talking such nonsense like, for example, if you do this, you will go to hell. If you do that, you will go to hell. In fact, I saw a video of a pastor who said that, all his members were his sheep. And he got people to actually kneel down on 4 legs and crawl. Now, I want to say something here. I went to Philippines and I came back. And I was shocked at some of the cultures there, because what happens is that pastors of big churches are worshipped like gods. And they love it. And they behave like as such. I sometimes wonder, why are we in ministry? Are we supposed to frighten people to our obedience, or are we supposed to set people free from superstition? That makes me wonder why we answer the call. I just want to close with this. Jesus washed the disciples' feet? Do you know what were the verses that were shared when it came to Jesus washing the disciples' feet? It was this. Jesus knew that the Father has given all things to him. You know what? When he was filled with power, he took off his clothes, tied a girdle around his waist, and washed the disciples' feet. That, my dear friends, is the power of God. It is called love. And I just don't understand how pastors can go and badmouth another pastor just to get him off the list, just because they believe in something else. I tell you now, if you teach hell in the lake of fire, you are the one that is a heretic. Because you are telling me, I have a God who loves me, died for me, not only died for me, died for everyone, and just because I don't believe in him, I throw him to hell? That's absolute nonsense. The reason why you want people to be in hell is because, number one, you cannot forgive certain people. Number two, you think your faith gives you an ascendancy, it makes a difference to the destination or the people who don't believe the same with you. What did Jesus say? Love your enemies. Why? Because God is like that as well. He causes the rain to fall on the evil as well as the good. Causes the sun to shine on evil as well as good. And thirdly, most importantly, is this. You think people who don't believe in Jesus Christ are evil and you are good. That's absolute nonsense. Because if Jesus were to die, he wouldn't die for you alone. He would die for everyone. And I want you to realize something, which is this. Forgiveness is not your business. Forgiveness is the business of Jesus and business of God. So if they forgive people, whether people accept their forgiveness or not, it's not important. The reason is very simple. Because I'm the one that is wrong. So if I am forgiving you and you don't accept my forgiveness, you're still forgiven. Because forgiveness lies with the person who was sinned against and not the person who sinned. Number 4, people believe in hell because of this. Because they think, all right, honestly speaking, that God cannot handle sin. And so they think that, I tell you honestly, this is the most stupid thing that someone could actually think of. They're so afraid of mixing with pastors who have a different ideology. Why? Because they're so afraid of being tainted. They're so afraid of being tainted with sin. As if sin can actually transfer from me to you just because I believe something else is different and you have fellowship with me. And because of that, what happens is that you get sin from me. You know what you call people like us? You call people like us demonics. You call people like this heretics. You call people like us demon-possessed. Seriously? If you actually believe that I'm demon-possessed, come and cast the demon out of me. Oh yeah, one more thing. You think that we can contaminate you, which is stupid. You know why? The ministry now we have is not the ministry of the law or the ministry of sin. It's called the ministry of life. It's called the ministry of grace. And do you know why Jesus touched the leper? Because he wasn't afraid that the leper sin or disease would come upon him. He knew very well the righteousness that is in him will go to the leper. Let me tell you this. If you really understand grace, when you touch someone, that person becomes righteous. What about those people who rebuke Jesus and God? What happens to them? Seriously? You think God is like us? Just because you say something wrong against me, I'm going to send you to hell? There is this incident where Elisha was preaching, and there was these 2 boys who came out and said, "Ha, you're a bald man." And then a bear came out and massacred these 2 boys. And Elijah said this, or rather Elisha said this. See, God killed them because they laughed at me. If that is the God that you worship, I pray, I beg of you, leave that God. Because you know who the God is that is mentioned in Elisha? It's Elisha himself. That's the idea that Elisha had in his mind about God, and it's wrong. When Jesus Christ was hung on the cross and people laughed at him, jeered at him, and said that, save yourself, those who save others. What did Jesus say? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You see, guys, people who are afraid of exposure, people who are afraid to think about their faith, people who are afraid to try to understand things, are cowards. They are so afraid that sin will contaminate them. So these are not grace preachers. These are preachers who think they know grace. But at the end of the day, they know nothing. Because every person Jesus touched, he healed. You know why? Because righteousness flowed out from him. And this is who we are. We are ministers of the new covenant righteousness. Everything we touch becomes holy. Everything we touch becomes holy. And I want to tell you this. That God lives in you and he's forever 24 hours touching you. Therefore, you are holy. You are not a sinner. Number 6. Why people believe in hell? Because they have a wrong picture of God. Can I tell you something as I close? Do you know the 2 things that separated Adam from God? Is this: sin. Number 2, nakedness. When he sinned against nakedness, he went to hide. Well, Angel, this is what I'm talking about. People like you. You are the people who don't understand scriptures because you don't even dare to actually look into the culture and the background. You are a coward. You keep on saying people twist the scriptures when you never even bother to read them yourselves. There are only two things that basically cause Adam to be separated from God. Number one is called sin. Number two is called nakedness. And I want you to realize something else. If you read actually Colossians chapter 1, you realize this. Paul says it gives God pleasure to have his fullness. Not 1%, not 2%, but fullness. Dwell in Christ. Where? On the cross, reconciling the whole world to himself through his blood. And I want you to know something very interesting. At the cross, Jesus became sin so that we became the righteousness of God. So the fullness of sin dwelt in Christ. And also this, Jesus was completely naked. Jesus was sin, completely naked. And what does the Bible say? God was pleased to have his fullness dwell in Jesus, reconciling the whole world to himself. That which you think actually separates you from God actually reconciles you to him. You see, this is why people believe in hell. Because, number one, they're ignorant. Number two, their hearts are full with hate. And number three, to be very frank with you, they have been wrongly taught. And so they live a life of fear, of superstition, of believing that Satan exists everywhere, around his room. You want to know where Satan is? The book of Revelation is very clear. His throne is in Pergamum. Please, take a machine gun, take all your weapons as possible, go to Pergamum and blast the hell out of Satan. If you believe he exists. You don't see Satan in the church. You don't see Satan everywhere. The book of Revelation is very clear. The throne of Satan is in Pergamum. Why don't you go there if you believe he exists? You see how hypocritical you are. You want to talk about exorcism, you want to talk about this, you want to talk about that. But guys, that's where Scripture says it is. It's in Pergamum. Go ahead. Bring all your weapons. Bring all your holy water. Bring all your anointing oil. Go to Pergamum and destroy Satan. It's there. In fact, some of you believe the book of Revelation is supposed to be written in the future, so you know where he is. Go. Destroy Satan. He's in Pergamum. In fact, let me tell you the truth. He's in a temple called the Temple of Zeus. That's where the throne of God is. So my encouragement to you is this. Go there. Destroy him. If you believe the book of Revelation is in the future, you know where to look for him. You know how basically to avoid the tribulation. Go and destroy him. Until you realize the stupidity of what you have been taught. Pergamum is a place where the temple of Zeus was. And in the temple of Zeus, one of the seats that was given to the gods there was the emperor. And there was a gentleman by the name of Antipas who refused to bow down to him. And the emperor actually killed him in that temple by burning him in a horse-like chamber, and he was burned alive. His name is Antipas. Many years ago, sources actually say Antipas exists around AD 90. But if you actually read the latest updates, scholars have actually placed him from AD 56 to AD 68. So he died around AD 68. Which means the book of Revelation is not written after AD 70. It's written before AD 70. That Satan there is none other than the Emperor Nero. Is he already dead? Which brings me to number 7, why people believe in hell. Because you are superstitious. And superstitious people are the most judgmental people. We just had one guy called Angel saying that I twist the scriptures. Really? There are 20 people watching my video now, and every one of them agrees with me. What about you? So please, if you think that I'm twisting scriptures, please go to Pergamum. Let me ask you this very interesting question as I end. I love a movie called Come Sunday. It's about Carlton Pearson, a person who suddenly believed that God saved everyone. And so Pearson was kicked out from his church for believing as an inclusionist. He believed that everyone was already saved. And so he was brought before some bishops who questioned him. And do you know what he said? He said, look, if we know of a way to actually save people from hell, would we not do it? And if we believe that God sent people to hell, or God imprisoned people to hell, are we not more merciful than God? Are we not more merciful than God? Then one of the bishops asked him, how can you believe in such things? And Carlton asked the bishop, do you have anybody in hell? And the bishop said, yes, my father is in hell. He's being tortured day and night. That person asked him, would you not, if you have a way to actually get him out of hell, pull him out of hell? You know what the bishop said? I wish he burned in hell for the way he treated me when I was a young man. Why do we believe in hell? Because we want people to be there. You honestly ask me this question. Does Jesus want anybody to be in hell? No. No. Then there are people who say, oh, Jesus tried to save them. It's their choice that they are going there. Seriously? If you actually believe that people want to go to hell, can I just ask you to do me a small little favor? Can you take your hand and put it on fire? Go ahead. Lit yourself on fire. If you're not supposed to do that, if you're not willing to do that, don't come and tell me you want to go to hell. That's one of the most stupid arguments that people have actually made. So as I close, I'm sorry, I sound a bit upset, a bit angry. But let me tell you the truth. I too was believing in hell. Until you know what? Until these things are shared to me by pastors who love me. And let me name you a few. Jack Crisco. Martin Trench. Michael Carr. Paul Hernandez. Paul White. Lynn House. And today, Derek Day. Just name a few. There's so many of them that has loved me. and share this revelation with me. I'm just taking it a step further. Guys, the lake of fire was Jerusalem. It's nothing to do with you. The book of life has nothing to do with you. The book of life is a Jewish book. The resurrection happened when? In AD 70. It's not about you. The resurrection there was about Israel. That is why it ends with this. The power of sin is the law. You and I were never under the law. You and I have always been born in the age of grace. As such, 1 Corinthians 15 is not about you. It's about how Israel turned from Jewish, from being neither Jew or Gentile. It's about Israel becoming the body of Moses, and now Israel becoming the body of Christ. So this Sunday, as you celebrate Resurrection Day, it's about you as well. Because guys, you are the new Israel. You have already been resurrected. And as such, you live something called the resurrected life. You live beyond the lake of fire. You live beyond hell. That's why Jesus said, I give you life, life abundantly. You are no longer from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You are from the tree of life. Look at Revelation 22. What does it say? Revelation 22 says the tree of life is on both sides of the river. And Jesus said this, if you believe in me, what happens? Streams of living water will flow out from you. So Revelation 22 is not about heaven. It's about you. It's about how you live now this new covenant resurrected life. You are not in death, you're in life. And therefore, as I close, may I encourage you, live a life of happiness. Live a life of joy. Stop believing all this nonsense about the slightest thing you do, you go to hell. All these stupid people who talk to you about these things is just trying to frighten the shit out of you. And you know what it says in the Bible? True love casts out all fear. With that, guys, take care. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Love is speaking to you guys. I really enjoy this. That's for those of you who are saying that I'm twisting the truth. Please, guys, go to Pergamum. I'll buy you the flight ticket if you want.